Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the MFW podcast. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify, it's a pleasure to be back with you. I'm Freddie Humphrey Wakefield. I'm joined by Jack Wright, Will Grant, and Henry Miller. There's no Matthew Saunders this week. He's away, so you've got me back instead. But anyway, today's podcast, it's not going to be nonsense Norwich discussion and us sort of scraping the barrel now that the season's over. We're going to go back to something we were doing to scrape the barrel before the season began. We're going to look back at our championship predictions and our league table as Jack just rubs his eyes, I think, out of horror and maybe a bit of despair when he looks back at a few of these. But before we dive into it, how just all three of you, how have you all been over the last 7 days? What's been going on with you all now that, well, we know Jack Wilshere won't be Norwich manager, and yeah, there's just a lot of different things all going on.
Yeah, I'll start. I've been really good, thank you. It's been really good. Had a really good week. Once again, presenting on Future Radio 2 till 4 every Thursday. If you don't know, get to know. And then also, I was involved in the Total Sports Show on BBC Radio Norfolk on Saturday, and that was really good. And Matty actually made an appearance on that, and we had a discussion all about Jack Wilshere and the Ben Napper news that Wilshere obviously won't be getting the job. So big news. I saw a tweet from the wonderful Gary Garrers during the week, basically saying that this club messes with your head. So at first he wasn't all in on Wilshere. Then he was when it looked like Wilshere was going to get it. And then now it's, got a tinge of disappointment that Wilshere didn't get it. I think I feel exactly the same, to be honest. So, it's weird how the club can play with your head like that. But no, on the whole, I've had a very productive week. Thank you.
Yeah, my week has been much, much better without obviously, football that Norwich are playing in. Just so much less stress-free, and I think I could deal with a few more weekends like this. But obviously, I'm sure when July comes around and also even August as well, then obviously I'll get a bit more excited. But for now, it's been a very, very nice start to summer. Yourself, Jack?
Yeah, I've just been sprucing up my CV, really. I've posted it to, Ben Napper. So fingers crossed. Who knows? Maybe I'll be in the dugout in August. You never know. But apart from that, I've mostly just been going back over all of the predictions that we made in August in preparation for this video. Oh, well, we'll get into it. So some of them were very good. Some of them were dreadful. Oh God, what were we thinking? If you want to watch August's prediction, it's obviously we will find a way to link it somehow. Maybe watch that first, or like remember it, or watch it afterwards. Either way, let's get into reacting to that.
Yeah, no, so as Jack has just said, some of them were bad, some of them were all right, some of them were actually quite good. So like we did with that prediction table, we will start at 24th, but rather than do the team we predicted to finish in that position, then compare, we're going to do it based on actual league positions. So beginning with 24th in the league, that ended up being Cardiff City, who Norwich beat on the final day. You see our predictions there on the left. So me and Matthew actually had Cardiff in 17th. Henry had Cardiff in 13th. Will 14th. Jack straight away has had a bit of a hooner with Cardiff. He thought they would finish in 10th. So not the worst start, really, from all of us. I'll just flash them back up again while I'm talking about it if you missed them. For me, I thought Cardiff were just going to have a standard Cardiff season in the Championship, finish lower mid-table, maybe get couple of shock results here and there. I thought they had a good enough team to stay in the division. That they've got some really good talents who I think will now be snapped up after relegation. It's funny, actually, they've got a winger called Ollie Tanner who I watched play in the third tier of non-league about 4 years ago. So that's quite surprising that he's sort of I say tearing it up. He's not really. But no, I just thought Cardiff were just going to finish sort of around lower mid-table. But Jack, I'll come to you. 10th place. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I thought they got some good signings. I rated like El Ghazi. I rated Callum Chambers, who obviously got sent off on the final day. I thought, is it Ruben Colwill, attacking midfielder? I thought he'd have a decent season, which he's kind of has sort of done. Again, they still beat us in Cardiff, so they can't be that bad. Yeah, I perhaps didn't anticipate how much of a chaotic football club they would become. Obviously, they have been chaotic since they decided to change their colours to red in that Premier League season for some reason. The chaos got the better of them, obviously. Was it Bullet who was in to start with? He got sacked. Who was the guy who was in afterwards? I forget his name.
Omar Reza, yeah.
Omar, I'm sorry, Cardiff. It was so forgettable. But yeah, I feel like Cardiff really, really sort of dropped off towards the end. They never really felt like the worst team in the division all season. So I don't think, a mid-table finish is that bad. But yeah, what was that? That was technically, let me go through my list, 14 places higher than they actually finished. So yeah, it's a shocker.
Yeah.
Wow. I think for me, Cardiff were in their own sort of mini league of 4 teams, along with Stoke, Preston, and Bristol City. They're always like the mid-table 4. Obviously, Bristol City have leaped up the table, which we'll speak about later. But Cardiff, they've had such a drastic dropout. And I think the reason why I put them to finish where they did is because Errol Bullard had quite a good end to last season. I think they finished 12th last season. And like you, Jack, I was quite impressed with some of the business they made. So yeah, for me, it would it looks set to be another mid-table season for the Bluebirds. But obviously, they've had a calamitous season. Didn't really work out with Omar Reza. Aaron Ramsey was cursed really because he couldn't really steady the ship when he came in. The damage was already done then. And yeah, Cardiff will be playing League One football.
Yeah, so I think Jack made some good points, actually. I agree with him that it never really felt like Cardiff were the worst side, but it just felt like that real bad end to the season really caught up with them. Obviously, it feels like, especially in recent years, the teams which make some quite poor choices and maybe choices impulsively, they're the kind of teams which seem to do quite poorly in the end. And I think going for Aaron Ramsey, I think it was 2 games left. Obviously, I know we did the same with Wilshere, but I think the context is much greater there. But yeah, it was a really poor season for Bluebirds.
Yeah, no, it was really bad for them. And as said, we'll be playing League One football. Well, one of the 2 others who will also be playing League One football is Plymouth Argyle. And actually, we all thought they would. So you have got Will and Jack who got it absolutely spot on. Me and Henry were 1 place off. We thought they'd finish in 22nd, and Matthew thought they'd finish in 24th. But yeah, I think with Plymouth last season, stayed up by the absolute skin of their teeth, really, on the final day. They had a very, they had Morgan Whittaker firing goals hit, in pretty much nearly every game they played. Of course, he went on to Middlesbrough this season in January. And they never really got going, even though they brought in Muslic as manager and brought in some new players that sort of did give them a bit of a boost. It looked like they might just sneak it. They beat Liverpool in the FA Cup, and people thought maybe after that they were really going to kick on. Ryan Hardy had a good end to the season, but I never really believed that this Plymouth team would stay up another year. The promoted sides all looked a bit stronger than them. And given the rest of the quality of the league and their sort of minuscule budget, I think, as we've, I'll flash them up again, as we all predicted, we all thought Plymouth would go down. Plymouth went down. So I don't really, there's not much more else to say, but we actually got something right quite early on.
Yeah, I'll back my only correct prediction. Sorry, spoilers for the rest of the video. It's the only one I got bang on, and I'll take it. I think in my prediction, I said that Wayne Rooney would be sacked very early on. He lasted until before Christmas, I think. But again, we could all see that, with his, disastrous spell with other teams, that it just wasn't going to work out. Whittaker obviously stayed until January, but was pretty, average for when he was still at Plymouth. Obviously, again, Plymouth managed to beat us at home, didn't they, Frederick?
Yes. Yes,
What an
they
afternoon. Obviously, that 3 points was in vain. I think, obviously, if they keep Muslich in League One, they'll be in good stead to go back up. But yeah, didn't really have many kind of exciting signings. We would widely agree that in terms of teams to visit Carrow Road this season, they were one of the worst on that kind of 6-1 night. Yeah, I mean, going down, but like I said, they're probably in good stead for going back up next season.
Yeah, I find it interesting how both Freddie and Jack have been very complimentary towards Muslich, and I think rightly so. If he'd have started the season at Plymouth, I don't think they would have gone down. It looked like, especially when they were beating Liverpool in the FA Cup, it looked like those players would run through a brick wall for him. But to be honest, they were relegated the minute they appointed Wayne Rooney as manager. I think I said on our predictions video that he might have less pressure on him because the shackles are off. It's not as chaotic as when he came in at Birmingham and replaced a fan favourite in John Eustace. But the fact of the matter is, it was make or break, and it broke him. And I'll be honest, I don't ever think he'll manage at the level again. He's had 3 cracks at it now, and all 3 have ended in disaster really for him. So yeah, I think it was really that Wayne Rooney appointment in the summer that screwed Plymouth over. But I think even though they did have standout players like Brian Hardy and like Morgan Whittaker, albeit only until January, they were on paper as well probably one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst. So that's why I think we all put them to get relegated as well. But I certainly think, as you said, Jack, if they stick with Muslich, then I could easily see them coming straight back up.
Yeah, just to add, I think Plymouth had a chance probably to sack Rooney. I think between when they lost to us 6-1 and when they lost to Coventry, I think they lost to Coventry about 4-0 as well. And I think they had a very, very poor winter spell. And I just think maybe if they hired like Muslich maybe 3 weeks earlier, maybe they might have stayed up, because I think although Plymouth were quite poor overall, especially away from home all season, they did produce a lot of memories at Home Park, and I do generally think they did provide some real good life to the Championship, albeit briefly. But yeah, I do think they might have had a chance if they kept Muslich. No, if they fired Rooney a bit quicker.
Yeah, I think I agree with what all of you have said. No, Muslich, rightfully so. If he stays, and a few of the players do, they will be in very good stead for coming back up. But who knows? But now we move on to the worst prediction we probably all made. 22nd was Luton Town. No one expected Luton to be relegated, I think. I don't think anyone of any team, a supporter, would have expected Luton relegated. So what did we expect? Oh dear.
Wow, we're good.
Me and Jack thought Luton would win the league. We got that horribly wrong. Henry thought they would finish in 6th and get in the playoffs. Again, horribly wrong. Will thought Luton would finish in 4th. Again, quite horribly wrong. Even Matthew putting Luton in 7th was horribly, horribly wrong. Jack's got his shirt over his head. I want to put my hat over my head. What on earth happened there? I really don't know what happened. Luton Town should have walked this league. The team they had at their disposal, even with the managers they had at their disposal, Rob Edwards in this division took them up after coming in, and they were a massive breath of fresh air in the Premier League. They gave it such a good go and very nearly stayed in the league. I thought they would at many points in the Premiership last season. But now they've got back-to-back relegations. They are back in League One. Almost, they're straight back to where they came from. And it's amazing. You look at some of the players: Colton Morris, Elijah Adebayo, Tahit Chong, Alfie Doherty, even Thomas Kaminsky, who, albeit he's 32 and he's not the best keeper, still a decent keeper at Championship level. They have Tim Krul as a backup, and they have finished 22nd. Yes, it happened on the last day, but they went down with a whimper. Battered, what was it, 5-3 by West Brom, and I think the 3 complemented Luton, but. Jack, we thought they would win the league. How do you even explain it?
I feel not as bad knowing that it wasn't just me. If it was just me on my own, you would have all looked at me and gone, you moron. But hey, Freddie and I are in the same deluded fan club. Yeah, I thought, what I said in my prediction was that the momentum of them going down so amicably, they didn't really... they weren't really thrashed in the Premier League. And I think the one thing that I didn't read into was their lack of business in the summer. I think they brought in McGuinness from Cardiff, and I think Victor Moses, and I think there was a German midfielder called Kraus to kind of essentially replace Ross Barkley. The business was terrible, but like you said, they retained most of their really good players and still signed, I think it was Isaiah Jones in January. So they bolstered in January. And I think the basis of my prediction was that their trajectory has always been upwards, over the last decade or so. This kind of from grace, it probably makes sense just because they don't have, the infrastructure. They don't have, the experience. And clearly Rob Edwards has gone from one of the most coveted managers in the Championship to one that, even in our position where we're looking for a manager and he's not even on the list. And we'd kind of look at him and think, I don't know, actually. Like there's actually now sort of question marks. So, yeah, I echo exactly what you said, Freddie, and I think no one would have predicted them to go down. I think we would have all looked at, how well organised they were as a team, as a football club. So yes, this kind of relegation, which they have looked terrible for a lot of the season. Obviously, a nice 6 points for us, but they looked, unlike Cardiff, they've looked pretty dire throughout most of the season.
Yeah, I can remember on the final day almost feeling a bit vindicated that Luton did go down, probably just because of how bad they were. And, they've had a disastrous season and definitely deserve to get relegated. The league table doesn't lie. But going back to what I think it was Will said about Rooney, and had Plymouth have sacked Rooney earlier, then they more than likely would have stayed up. You could argue the same about Luton. Yes, Rob Edwards did a fantastic job of getting Luton to the Premier League in the first place and coming within touch and distance of keeping Luton in the Premier League. But it was clear around September, October, November that he'd lost his magic and it wasn't working for Rob Edwards. The thing where Plymouth went wrong is appointing someone like Matt Bloomfield. Now, I'm not saying that Matt Bloomfield's a bad manager, because I don't think he is. I think he's a good manager and he did very well with Wickham last season. But this is his first Championship job and he's being thrown into the deep end. It's never going to be easy, and he is going to have to take that time to adapt. And as you could see, he did need time, but they did start getting results towards the end of the season. And for them to be that bad and get relegated on the final day of the season, where a Portsmouth goal elsewhere still would have kept them up, I think is testament to the job that Matt Bloomfield did. But no, I think their confidence was completely shot after relegation from the Premier League. And it is a sad one that Luton won't be in the Championship next season. But, hopefully they can bounce back and won't stagnate in League One.
Yeah, agree with everything which you guys have said. I would just like to add as well, I think if you're one of those players who were at Luton during that Premier League season, and you also experienced this one as well, I think those guys have got to take a lot of blame for that as well. Just constant poor performances, really. I know maybe you could say that Edwards didn't really adapt as much probably as he could have done at times. But I just think overall, if you've got two, like, one kind of main core of players over 2 seasons and they've delivered back-to-back relegations, I think a lot has to be said about those guys there as well. And obviously, I think Ross Barkley for them leaving was always going to be an absolutely huge miss. But I just don't think they kind of recruited his quality elsewhere well enough, really. And I think that's probably what hurt them the most, really. But I think they've got some decent players they signed in January, and they might be kind of key for them to kind of have a good year next season in League One.
Yeah, well, they need to, because otherwise it'll be feisty at Kenilworth Road, the atmosphere after 2 poor seasons. So you feel they need something to give them a bit of a boost. But we now go into the teams that stayed in the division but didn't get up to the playoffs. So we begin with Hull City in 21st. So our predictions here, again, they're not great. I thought they would finish bang in mid-table in 12th. Matthew thought they would finish in 8th. Jack and Will went with 15th. Henry went with 16th for the Tigers. Now, again, this one seems a bit weird because last season Hull were right up there in the playoff race until around sort of February. So I guess my thinking behind it was, they had lost a couple of decent players, and the quality they had replaced them with didn't look overly great. I think even when you look at when we played them early in the season and beat them 4-0, they were calamitous really on the day at Carrow Road. But no, they weren't great, hence why they have finished in 21st. But again, a little bit of a shock one really, because it just felt as if Hull were again just destined for sort of just mediocrity at best. But they only just managed to stay in the division.
Yeah, and they did spend quite a lot of money as well. Obviously, gave us a nice £5 million ish for Abu Kamara. I think they signed Rolls as well, who, by all accounts, was a really coveted talent. Again, we sort of talk about chaotic football clubs. Hull are that archetypal chaotic football club, and obviously, I think Tim Volter was their manager to start with. Well, yeah, he was destined for the sack. Ruben Selles, I think, obviously they poached him from Reading, where by all accounts he was doing a great job again at a very chaotic football club. And I think it's a surprise to see them so close to the drop. But I think the sentiment of them, finishing nowhere near the playoffs and kind of nowhere near kind of anything fun or exciting, I think my logic still kind of stands with that. And I think, well, although it was like 6 places out, I was kind of right. I'll take that as a win.
Well, I did predict them 16th, which was the lowest out of all of us, and I'm quite pleased with that. I think, as Jack was saying, they're the archetypal chaotic football club, and that stems from them sacking Liam Rosenior. Yes, I wouldn't have wanted Rosenior as Norwich manager, but the job he did at Hull City, getting that team to 7th place in the Championship, and to be honest, in and around the playoffs all season last season, they're unlucky not to get it, is brilliant. And the job he's doing at Strasbourg now in Liga is brilliant as well. And the fact that they deemed it right to sack him and get in someone like Tim Volter, who didn't really have a clue by the end of it, is shocking. And they can only have themselves to blame. Where Hull are lucky is that they've got a manager such as Ruben Sayers. He did such a brilliant job at Reading. Again, another club in crisis when he was managing them. And to get them in and around the playoffs as well was brilliant. Yes, he did leave and take the step up to join Hull. But had they have gone with someone else, they definitely would be in League One next season. So hats off to Ruben Sayers for keeping them afloat and keeping them in the division. But it could and should have been a lot more for Hull this season. Had they have just kept Liam Rosenior and actually backed him, they could have had a good season, and that is purely down to their owners.
Yeah, I went 15th for Hull, but to be honest with you, that was kind of a guess because I remember we recorded this video, and I think we still had about a month left in the transfer window. and I still think there was quite a lot of speculation about who they bring in, or actually still who might actually leave as well. So I kind of guessed with that one, but but I think going into next season as a whole, I think they've got some nice core players to that group now, and I think if they keep Sellers, I think they can really kick on.
No, you'd expect it. No, a good manager in Sellers, so that could be one to watch next season. Hull, look at maybe who stays and who goes and their recruitment. But up next, the team who everyone predicts to finish either 11th or 12th, but they didn't finish there this season. Preston North End ended up in 20th. Oh, and look at that. Me and Henry had them both in 11th. Matthew had them as high as 6th. So that's quite an interesting prediction. Will had them in 16th. He was closest. Jack went with 14th. Well, lads, as I just said, everyone expects Preston mid-table because that's where they finished for the last 6-7 years. But just sort of had a bit of a slump this time around. It's sort of, it's quite difficult to pinpoint as to why that happened because, they didn't really lose too many key players, didn't really sign many key players either, but just sort of slumped down the championship table near the end of it.
And I think 20th isn't really reflective of the feel like a 20th season for Preston. Obviously, they went all the way, I think, to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. Obviously, when they played us at Carrow Road for our watch-along, they were comfortably beating us. You really kind of thought, well, them under Paul Heckingbottom, who was so brilliant at Sheffield United, that feels like a good appointment. Obviously, I said in my prediction, how long will Ryan Lowe last? The answer was one game season, and then he was sacked. Like, what? Like, kind of Preston have this air of kind of being quite consistent, but are we going to throw to the category of chaotic? It feels like a lot of their players are not being offered new deals. It feels like it's a lot of turnover in the summer. I saw one of their players found out that they were being released by seeing on Instagram. And that just screams that something weird is kind of going on. And I'm sort of, maybe you'd look at this and think, well, next season in the Championship, we've also got some really big teams coming up from League One. We don't know which other team is coming up from League One, but have we already got a relegation candidate for next season, potentially?
I think I went into this prediction thinking, okay, I need to give Paul Heckingbottom more credit because the job he did at Sheffield United, getting them into the Premier League, I thought was really good. I didn't expect him to deliver automatic promotion when he was there 2 seasons ago. But again, with Preston, they're known for being a good footballing side and getting the best out of probably average players, similar to Bristol City, similar to Millwall. And similar to Bristol City, they went completely under the radar this season until they were staring down the barrel of relegation and then sort of sat up and went, guys, we could seriously go down here, and then made sure of their safety. So once it got to the stage where relegation was serious, they sort of stood up and made themselves get noticed. But other than that, went completely under the radar. But with Preston, it's always, difficult because they're a club that should really kick on. They've spent a decade in the Championship, and it's just another stagnant lower mid-table season for them. So I think if you're a Preston fan and if you're a season ticket holder at Deepdale, you'd have to be disappointed with how this season has turned out.
Yeah, I think Heckingbottom did probably do a good job, probably up until they played Villa in the FA Cup, I think, during February time. I think it was a quarter-final. So I think up till then, I think Preston were quite a very good dogged side. They played with 4 kind of central midfielders, and they did definitely nullify us very, very well, actually, across 2 games as well. And although obviously they'll be very, very sad about the end of the season as such, I do think Preston should be a bit fearful about where they are right now, because as also you guys said, look at Rex and Birmingham coming up. I don't think Preston can't afford another season of stagnation, because it could become quite a season for them next year where they might be looking over their shoulders quite a lot of it as well. So, look, we'll see. I think they've got some good experienced players there that will obviously still play there, and that might kind of get them through some games next year. But for me overall, I just thought Preston would finish mid-table, and they kind of did, and that's it about Preston, isn't it? Really, I guess.
Yeah, no, you can't say much more, because next season we'll probably predict them to finish 11th again. But we'll move on to the first of the 3 promoted sides, as they all ended up staying up. It's Derby County. So I thought they would go down in 23rd. Henry and Will thought they would finish rock bottom of the division. Jack was very close. He had Derby to finish in 20th. Matthew went with 15th. Now, for this one, for myself, I just thought Derby were destined to go down. I thought that the squad they had wasn't good enough, and they had a really tough start to the season as well. I remember the first game against Blackburn. I watched that game and just thought Derby I think they were winning in the game at one point, and they fell apart so easily. Just had no conviction about them, and that sort of backed up as to why I thought they would end up going down. I thought they had nothing about them, and Paul Warne is a good manager, hence why, he did what he did with Derby. But no, I'd never thought they were really going to be comfortable enough. But again, was proved wrong. So Derby ended up staying up. But Jack, you were, well, apart from I think Matthew as well, you were the only one who thought Derby were actually going to stay up this season.
I back myself with this. I'm happy with this. Derby to stay up. That call was correct. What I said was that I really like Paul Warne. That wasn't true. In terms of his quality over the season, it was the appointment of John Eustace that probably was the saving of Derby, who were very much in and around the bottom 3 for a lot of the campaign. Pulled up their socks and got over the line. For Eustace to have moved from playoff chasing Blackburn to Derby was an absolutely unthinkable decision. And in the end, if you're a Derby County fan, you're probably not looking back on this season with much glee, but you stayed up, and you now have a foundation with a really good manager to kick on next season. It's just whether they'll be, backed with enough resources to actually build, a bit more of a decent championship side. But back them to stay up, and they have stayed up. So there we go.
Yeah, and I think in terms of my prediction, it all comes down to Paul Warne. I think out of the 3 promoted sides this season, on paper, they probably had the weakest squad and one of the oldest squads as well, alongside Oxford. And Paul Warne obviously has had multiple stabs at the Championship before and failed with Rotherham. But with Derby, he is going to get more backing, more money, and I like Paul Warne as a guy and as a manager at League One level, especially. But it's clear, had they have stuck with him, they would have got relegated. And obviously Eustace has ties to Derby already as a player. But as Jack said, the fact that he chose to give up playoff chasing Blackburn, who were in the playoffs when he left, to go to Derby, who were staring down the barrel of relegation, was such a big decision. But it shows a statement of intent from their owners as well. They saw Derby in League One for 2 seasons, and they do not want to get back there. And John Eustace, them appointing him, basically secured their championship status. And I think it's interesting because out of the other 2 teams who were below them but who did stay up, so Hull and Preston, you're probably thinking, okay, well, they can be concerned about next season. Whereas if you're a Derby fan, I don't think they will get relegated next season. I think they've got probably enough in the tank and a good manager to really kick on from here. So this is the first one that you can look at and go, okay, well, there's probably a silver lining there with Derby. So, yeah, fair play to them, fair play to Eustace.
Yeah, W used their strengths very, very well. They've got some real good defenders, and I think that helped them massively. I think as well, set pieces, especially for them, were huge. I don't know the official number of goals they scored from set pieces, but I think they were definitely in the top 3 in the league this season as well. So that was absolutely huge for them. I did fear for them actually when Curtis Nelson got an injury till the end of the season, but look, they managed to find a way out of it, and they did so brilliantly in terms of defensively. I thought very rigid, and I think Eustace definitely realised that and kind of thought that if they were to stay up, that I think defence was probably the best way of doing so as well. I think this year they were an absolutely awful watch. Absolutely, they were. But in terms of getting over the line, fair play to Eustace.
Yeah, no, massive fair play to him. Really well done. As we move on to 18th and Stoke City, and this one was actually quite a decent one for a few of us because Will and Henry got it spot on. They had Stoke in 18th. Jack had them in 11th. Matthew had them in 21st. I had Stoke in 20th. Sort of, I wasn't far off, and my thoughts on Stoke, they have just become a lower mid-table championship team. That they don't exactly have any players who stun or wow me, apart from their goalkeeper, Victor Johansson, because he's ridiculously good. He shouldn't be playing for a side like Stoke. But apart from that, there's no one else who really wows me in that Stoke team. And, based off league position, it showcases that. There's no Stoke player who can maybe take a game by the scruff of the neck or can give you a real moment of pure quality. And, they struggled for majority of the season, but they sort of clawed their way up the table toward the end. And, 18th, it's respectable, but, this team were in the Premier League 5 years ago. And it's maybe a bit of a concern for them. They continue to sort of slump down, but, they're just one of them teams that they never really look like they'll be promoted, but they're just that little bit too good to go down.
Yeah, and again, another team that came to Carrow Road this season and looked fairly abject for a lot of the game. Obviously, Schumacher came in, not Michael, and I think my logic was that he did a decent job with Plymouth, a bit of a bigger club, potentially a few more resources. He would kick on. Would you say Stoke's chaotic or just kind of, stagnating? I think stagnating is probably the best word. It is a shame because, like you said, they're one of the kind of Barclays teams. But now you're looking at them, being in now a championship relegation battle, and it's not really that surprising. I said again, in my prediction, I backed the signings of Johansson and Gibson. Gibson has essentially gone in and been their captain. But again, kind of in forward positions, I don't really, there's not many kind of Stoke attackers that really catch my eye. You kind of look at like youth prospects as well. There's not many youth prospects that catch the eye either. Robbins obviously came in and sort of ship a little bit. Again, we sort of talked about Derby with Eustace next season. A good manager they can kick on. I see Mark Robbins being sacked by like October next season, and for the Stoke weirdness to continue. It feels like they're only going in one direction, and that's unfortunately downwards.
Yeah, I think I don't know what it is, but I think there's a curse surrounding Stoke. They take good managers and absolutely put them through the ringer. And now it's Mark Robbins, who is undeniably a good manager, did such a good job with Coventry. But I think Jack's right. If he lasts into 2026, I'll be shocked. They just always seem to stink the place out. And I don't know what's happened to Stoke from their European days and the Pulis era even, but they're a shadow of their former self, and I'll be very shocked if they don't finish around here or maybe even lower next season.
Yeah, I just think their hierarchy have just made a total mess of things as of late. I think it's the Coates family, but also as well more recently Schumacher. I felt it was very harsh that that Schumacher did actually get sacked. Obviously, John Walters was the actual guy to actually sack him, and I do think his choices and in terms of recruitment and just overall like kind of decisions, really, I just don't think he's been overly reliable for them. I wonder where they'll be next season. I think they've got a few good players, like the likes of Ashley Phillips had a good season for them at the back as well. But overall, yeah, it's a squad for me which needs a massive reboot in terms of. I just think it's very, very hard to kind of figure out what Stoke trying to do on a pitch, really. It feels like one week they might play a bit pragmatic, the next might be a bit more expansive, but it just feels to me that they just don't really have a clear vision, and things just seem a bit too muddled right now in terms of recruitment, playing style, and all that kind of stuff. I think if Robbins gets backed and gets listened to very well by his hierarchy, they might have a better season. But if I'm Stoke, I'm very, very worried about next season.
Yeah, could be a rough one for the Potters, but we'll move on to another one of the promoted teams. We'll go to Oxford United, who ended up finishing a very respectable 17th after promotion from League One. We didn't think they would all do so well. I had them bottom of the league. Will and Jack had them to be relegated in 22nd. Henry thought they would just stay up in 21st. Matthew had them in 23rd. Well, for me, I thought, well, a lot of people agreed with it. They all thought Oxford had nowhere near enough to keep them in the division, and that's ultimately why I had them bottom. I thought they were the weakest side in the league, and they, albeit, they've got some great supporters who back them through thick and thin, and, just that might have given them a bit more reason to go and get some more points. Just didn't think they'd have enough whatsoever. And then Norwich went along to the Kassam on opening day, and Oxford showed everyone they were not there to just make up the numbers. They pressed relentlessly. They had so many opportunities. They beat Norwich 2-0. It could have been more. Norwich were dreadful, but Oxford from the off showed everyone what they were about and proved a lot of doubters, well, even including all of us. They proved us all wrong. They did really, really well, and I have nothing but respect for them. I think 17th is a fantastic finish, and yeah, I thought they were going to just get sort of walked over every week, but it wasn't that at all.
And in a lot of points of this season, they were walked over. It wasn't all roses. I think they had a very good start to the campaign, a very kind of wobbly Christmas, and then sort of just solidified after that. In both of the games that they played against us, they seemed like a proper championship outfit, and tactically were spot on in both games. It's now a case of you've got a second season in the championship. Are you then going to have a lot of money to spend? Are you going to be able to buy even more? You may be even worried that someone like Josh Murphy, who left them as a kind of key talisman, they not have as many goals. But I think they've proved everyone wrong. I think most people would have had them to finish bottom. And what did I say? I think it's 22nd, so it's 5 places out. That's not respectable, but there we go.
Yeah, as you said there, Freddie, and as we've seen, I did predict Oxford to stay up. I thought they'd come up with a point to prove, and boy, did they do that. But I was really impressed with the signings they made in the summer as well. I thought it would be difficult, and I thought they'd just about survive by the skin of their teeth. But in reality, they were fairly comfortable, even heading into the last few games of the season when mathematically they could have gone down. You're looking at it and go, okay, well, if they pick up points at home, especially, then they'll be absolutely fine. And that's what they were. I think, it's going to be the phrase of this podcast that ex-manager was sacked unfairly. But another one you could chuck in there was Des Buckingham, a Oxford United fan who'd got Oxford to the unprecedented heights of the Championship, when realistically they were probably looking at a mid-table finish in League One last season. And for him to have done that and then lost his job, I thought was quite harsh. But to replace him with Gary Rowett, someone, yes, who does play boring and dull football, but does get results for their so-called smaller teams. And I think they went on a 9 or 10 match unbeaten run when Rowett first came into the squad. And that is their bread and butter. That is what kept them in the division. And yes, he did peter out towards the end of the season, but did pick it back up again. And it was enough for Oxford to finish the season quite strong and clear of relegation and head into that final game with nothing to play for. And the pressure of perhaps needing a win gone. With Oxford, though, I do worry for them just because their budget isn't going to be as strong as the teams around them. Even someone like Stoke, who were predicted probably to have another calamitous season next season, can still outspend Oxford. You've had Birmingham and Wrexham come up, who will be in the top half of the table at least. So I feel like the Championship could leave Oxford behind, and that's no fault of their own. But I feel maybe that they're in a similar position to Plymouth. And yes, it's harsh, but they just don't have the resources to compete long term, I don't think, which is a shame. But this season certainly should live long in the memory for Oxford and Oxford United fans.
Yeah, I just want to add as well, Rowett did an absolutely fantastic job, but I just want to say as well, I thought their defensive line was fantastic, especially since the start of the new year. I think Margaret Hellick was absolutely fantastic second half of the season. So reliable for them in terms of winning important blocks, tackles, but also as well his partner alongside him in Kieran Brown, a very, very tall centre half who's got very, very good heading qualities, but he can also play out from the back very, very well as well. And I did see Norwich were linked with him, actually. I don't know how true that is, but I just want you to pay huge respect to their spine of the team, really. I thought coming in goal was very, very reliable. Then as well, yeah, Hellick and Brown, and obviously as well, Moore when he played at the start of the season as well. And then just having someone like Brannigan there or Will Volts there as well, I just think that helped them massively. And I think some early goals for them by Mike Harris as well was very, very important for them as well. So I think they played well in very, very important times to them, and fair play to them.
Yeah, mega fair play. No, they did really well to stay up, and like Henry said, I agree with him. They may struggle financially to compete over the long term in this league, but who knows? They may go and shock a few more people next season. But up to the last of the promoted League One teams, it was Portsmouth right next to Oxford. Portsmouth finishing 16th. For predictions, not the worst. Everyone here thought they'd stay up, thought they would finish 14th. Henry went 20th. Will went with 21st. Jack went with 17th. Matthew went with 19th. For me, with Portsmouth, I mean, obviously they finished lower than I predicted, but I thought Portsmouth were going to be the team who came up and shocked everyone. I thought they were going to be more than comfortable given the togetherness they had, and they've got a quality manager in John Massinho. He's a brilliant, brilliant coach, and no, his achievements with Portsmouth are well and truly deserved. You know, they did last season in League One were brilliant, and then to come up and gave it a proper go. I mean, they absolutely embarrassed Norwich at Carrow Road. That was when Portsmouth looked like they may actually slip up and be relegated potentially. But no, I think you just need to look at a performance like that to see what they're all about. Just so adamant on winning football matches through efforts, which they did for majority, and the players at their disposal. Josh Murphy was a starlet for them this season. He was a breath of fresh air for Portsmouth. Even Colby Bishop up front ended up having a pretty decent season for them, scored a hat-trick against Norwich. So no, I thought Portsmouth were going to do well, and they did exactly that.
Yep, and that's all promoted teams staying up, so that's quite a turnout for the books. One place off for me. Again, I'm pretty happy with that. I thought they would stay up. I thought they would have enough. Ultimately, what this season will be remembered for is their home form. Their away form barring that wonderful afternoon at Carrow Road for them. Their away form was pretty abysmal. And again, for any team in any division, if you're scrapping to stay up, you've got to keep your home form pretty consistent. And as again, Freddie found out when he went to Fratton Park. It was at the time, and 0-0 against Portsmouth, we kind of thought, well, it was actually okay. It was decent. Another one that has kind of surprised expectations, but not for me. I knew they'd do well.
Well, I put them in 20th, but I did put them as the highest finishing of the promoted clubs, and that's exactly what they were. I think with Portsmouth, they came up and did struggle. They looked very poor in terms of their results at the start of the season, but they were playing good football the right way, and were just being really unlucky and just not getting the results. Fair play to the Portsmouth hierarchy. It would have been so easy for them to have a barren run like they did, and for the Portsmouth hierarchy just to go, Mousinho, I know you've got us up, but we need to change things to ensure we stay up. Instead, they backed him, they backed their man, and man, have they reaped the rewards for it. I think, as Jack said, although they got that historic win at Carrow Road that sort of exposed how poor we really were at the back, and was the beginning of the end for Johannes Torup. Their home form, they made Fratton Park a fortress, and it's such a tough place to go. They even beat Leeds there, so it was really that home form that meant that Portsmouth finished where they did. But I think they're another side, as you were saying, Freddie. Mousinho is such a good manager. And I think they're another side who don't really need to worry about the threat of relegation next season, and can look to move up the table. And I'm sure they're looking forward to their two feisty clashes against Southampton as well.
Yeah, I just want to say as well, Portsmouth starts the season on paper like the fixtures were so tough. So the fact that they came through that and they stayed up quite comfortably in the end, I would say, is just fantastic for them, really. It just shows you've got a very, very strong core of players there who are mentally very, very well checked out, really, and it just really combine well together as a group. And I think next season could be a really good one for them. They've got a real good home record, a good manager, and I think as well they'll just continue to recruit very, very smartly as well. But I will check in as curveball, guys. I would happily take Mousinho at Norwich as well. So very, very unlikely, but definitely a project there where I think Portsmouth are definitely on the up.
No, they are. And it's good for them because they had years of turmoil, ended up in League Two, nearly went out of business. So it's a great story to see Portsmouth back where really they belong. But we'll go to 15th. We'll go with a team who had a bit of beef with Norwich over the season. We'll go to Queen's Park Rangers, who ended up 15th in the league. I was agonisingly close, as was Henry. I had them 16th. Henry had them 14th. Will was close in 13th. Jack was close in 18th. Matthew was very close as well with 16th. So we were pretty much, we were almost spot on in all fairness, even if we didn't get the position right. We all thought QPR would be a mid-table side because, again, since relegation from the Premier League in 2015, that's what they have been for 10 years. They've just been a sort of stagnating club in this division. They've got some good players. There are individuals there who are talented, and especially their manager, Martí Cifuentes, a name who has actually been sort of thrown around with the Norwich City vacancy. So a good manager who ultimately is sort of helping Queen's Park Rangers maintain their position as a sort of mid-table team, and maybe they can rise up the table a little bit. But no, we all thought they would finish around where they did, and hey-ho, they ended up around where we thought they would be.
And I think I've been quite critical of them. And my logic was they'd probably start well, Cifuentes would get poached, and then they'd hire someone else who was not as good. Obviously, he's still in his position, albeit on gardening leave. I hope his onions and his, petunias are going well. But yeah, obviously at the start of the season had kind of a very kind of very mixed form. Obviously, no wins at home until, you guessed it, we turned up. And I think we essentially springboarded their, revival in form. So, yeah, don't worry, QPR. You can thank us later. Yeah, I mean, some very good kind of individual performances over the season. Notably, Jimmy Dunn was a player who really stood out for them. But yeah, again, a kind of mid-table pottering finish. We were sort of close. I can't believe none of us got it bang on. But there we go. Nowhere near relegation, but nowhere near the playoffs. That's kind of about right.
Yeah, it was agonising how close we all got, but yeah, we're all close, but no cigar. But I feel like on the last podcast, I mentioned that it seems over the past 6 or 7 years, Norwich and Watford have been almost tied at the hip and have been so close together in terms of league positions, and especially over the last 2 seasons, with them both doing the Great Escape. I've said the same about both QPR and Sheffield Wednesday, but I think when I was doing my predictions, I thought, okay, Danny Roll and Sheffield Wednesday, they probably have a better squad and a much higher ceiling than what QPR do. So whilst I can see them maybe knocking on the door for playoffs, but slightly falling away towards the end of the season, I can definitely see QPR being nowhere near the playoffs, but also being nowhere near relegation. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. Martí Cifuentes is a good manager. It was clear when he came in and pulled off the Great Escape and kept QPR in the Championship. But it does look, for all intents and purposes, that he's going to leave, whether that's to West Brom or to become the next Alan Titchmarsh, who knows? But yeah, I think now this summer and appointing the right manager is crucial for them, because if they get it wrong again, then yeah, they could easily struggle.
Yeah, I think Cifuentes made them a very, very good, well-drilled side. I think they play very, very narrow defensively, and I just think that kind of helps them, especially in quite a small pitch and Loftus Road. And I think Norwich had it very, very hard to try and play through them, and I think many other teams also struggled as well. Some good performances by the likes of Kaiki Sato, obviously Jack mentioned, Jimmy Dunn there. I'll be very intrigued to see where they go next for their manager. Whether they kind of go for someone similar, or they might go for someone with a different play style. Who knows? But they've got a decent side to build on next year, albeit like their funds probably aren't overly glorious.
No, it isn't. But now we thoroughly go into the mid-table bit of the Championship. We go to 14th, and this was where Watford ended up. Again, another sort of backward season for them. But let's have a look at predictions. I had them in 18th.
Oh, Jack.
Oh, Jack. Jack had them bottom of the league. Will had them in 19th. Henry had them 17th. Matthew had them 20th. So we all thought Watford would do worse than what they actually ended up being. But I think it's fair enough. Watford, again, since relegation, well, with Norwich, have just been really poor. Their recruitment has been quite dire. They still haven't learned to back a manager throughout a season. Well, apart from Tom Cleverley, I think in recent years, he's like the third longest reigning manager, but he's just been given the sack. So they still can't back a manager to save their lives, which maybe you could argue costs them in previous years. But this season, looked like they were really strong at the start. They had a fantastic beginning to the season. And then Norwich came along and beat them 4-1 at Carrow Road and just played them off the pitch, really. And Norwich sort of disrupted the Watford party. But no, I still didn't think they had enough in them to make a proper challenge, and they ultimately didn't. They finished 14th. But Jack, bottom?
What an awful season by Watford. I mean, utterly dreadful. I mean, imagine losing to Norwich twice. I mean, that you deserve to be bottom if that is the case. Yeah. Okay. I think my logic was sort of similar to like where kind of Stoke are, kind of a former big Premier League team that's had a few years in the Championship. Again, incredibly chaotic football club. I thought that this would be the big ultimate shock, and I put my neck on the line, and I am wrong. They obviously didn't finish bottom, but they didn't finish near anything. Didn't really have much to shout about this season, and now they're on the search for another manager. So, obviously they're not the worst team in the Championship, but not really a great season for them. I think that's still fair.
I think there was a lot of discourse and a lot of hipsters online before the start of the season who backed Watford for relegation. And whilst I could perhaps get their logic, I didn't see a world where there would be three teams worse than Watford. And as you said, Freddie, they came out of the blocks flying, wanting to prove everyone wrong. And I think ultimately that was Tom Cleverley's downfall. The fact that they were got to November, December time and were still either in the playoffs or in contention for the playoffs, and then did drop off and in the end finished 14th, is probably what has cost Tom Cleverley his job. I think only Javi Gracia in recent years has gone from the first match day of the season to the last match day of the season in charge. And at any other club, you're thinking, okay, well, you finished 14th. A lot of people expect us to do worse than that. Like, you're going to kick on and you're going to have the summer. But of course, at Watford, with the Pozzos, it doesn't work like that. And Tom Cleverley has lost his job. And now I think it will be more of the same, rather than sort of similar to Norwich in a way. Rather than letting a project build, they've decided to cut it short, and they're going to have to now appoint another manager to start over again. Don't get me wrong, Watford is an attractive club to go to, but for a player that is, but for a manager it is a bit of a poison chalice. So it'll be interesting to see who is in the dugout at Vicarage Road come August.
And just 2 words from me, Pozzo out.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I think all Watford fans would agree with you. But as Henry's just said, we go from one team who had a manager, looked like they were going to back him long term, and they didn't. We move on to 13th and Norwich City, the team that we cover here on MFW. Predictions-wise, what was Matthew thinking? 3rd place for Norwich City. You know, it's very easy to say this with hindsight. Will was the closest of all of us. He went with 12th. Henry and Jack went with 8th. I went with 9th. Now, my thinking around Norwich this season, everyone knew transitional season. Everyone was saying it all year. That's exactly what we were promised. But I only had Norwich that high because of quality. The individual players in this team should never be a team in 13th. Borja Sainz, the 2nd top scorer in the league. Josh Sargent I want to say he was in the top 5. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he played well.
And as well, Jonathan Rowe, by the time we did the predictions.
Yes, no, Norwich did still have Jonathan Rowe. Yes, no. So Sargent, Rowe, Sainz, the signings Norwich brought in. Callum Doyle, a proven winner anywhere he went. He got promotion at every club before he came to Norwich. The young players coming in that we thought would gel in this new system because they were brought in for it. And ultimately, at the start of the season, around September, October, it looked like Norwich were going to achieve greater things. People tipped them. We tipped them. We did a video, me and Will, on Norwich on course for the top 2. And they weren't. They completely fell off. They had a dreadful second half of the season, and away form still didn't sort itself out. And in the end, a torrid run at the end of the season. I think it was 2 wins in 12. Cost Johannesov tore up his job. And you know, there's a lot of people who think it's unfair. There are people who think it is fair. But you know, we're not here to discuss that on this podcast or this video. We're just here to talk about their league position. And 13th, I think people would have expected Norwich to be there. A new manager with a new system, with a squad that wasn't his. We'd seen this before when Daniel Farke came in, and it was pretty much the identical season. You know, a torrid performance away at Millwall, a relatively promising spell around September and October. But Norwich just architects of their own downfall for pretty much, maybe 5 months of the season. It just went all wrong, and they find themselves back in a position where they have to go again next season with a new man.
Yeah, and I think we'll go away and we'll have some other special content where we go over the season as a whole. I think in terms of what I said in my prediction, I said I worried that we would still be defensively open, which we were. I backed that we would have quality up front, which we did. But ultimately, this is a drop off from where we should have finished. It was a terrible March and an even worse April. I don't think throughout the season we ever got a run going. I think probably the best run of form that we had was probably post Christmas when we beat Millwall, drew to QPR, beat Luton, and then I think beat Coventry. I think that's probably the longest unbeaten run that we had. But it felt constantly up down all season, as you will have known if you watched all of the podcasts. Again, the away form never got fixed. The injury crisis never mended. It's and it spiraled out of control to a point where Ben Napper obviously didn't see any progression into next season and made a big call. Again, I don't want to dwell on what I think will happen next season. We'll have lots of content talking about that, but I think on paper we definitely should have finished. When did I put this? 8th. We should have finished 8th, but we careered out of control.
Yeah, going back to what you said, Freddie, I think in terms of Norwich's league position, I was thinking probably more with my head than I was with my heart. Had I've gone with probably what my heart was telling me, I probably would have put Norwich a few places below what I did. But I thought, look, it is going to be a drop-off, but not by much. We're still going to compete for the playoffs just because of the sheer quality. As I said, when you were doing your piece, we still had Jonathan Rowe at the time, as well as Borja Sainz and Josh Sargent. In terms of our big sales, it was only really Gabriel Sara of the sort of star player sellable assets that had left by the time the season started. So I thought Norwich would potentially struggle to get into the playoffs for a second successive season. And you said there, Freddie, that we were promised a transitional season. We were, but the only people who didn't think we were promised a transitional season were those within the club, because Chris Gorham asked Giannis Oftarup if he had underachieved in not getting playoffs, and he didn't realise that was the goal. So I think that's been the main problem for Norwich, that whether you want to call it backstabbing from Ben Napper or not, yes, it is quite a strong word, but it looked like for all of the season that Torup was his man until he wasn't. And I think the sword ultimately does fall with Ben Napper. And this summer, as we've said on the podcast all season, is massive for Norwich, and it's massive for Ben Napper. I think, yes, this is his first managerial appointment as Norwich manager. You could argue he's got it wrong. He certainly thinks that he's got it wrong, hence why Giannis Oftarup isn't in post anymore. And I think fans have given him a bit of leniency for that. However, if he gets this next one wrong, especially not appointing Wilshere as well, who's perhaps someone who he knows quite well, and Stuart Webber, when he came to the club, knew German football quite well, went out and got Daniel Farke, and look what happened next. And the fact that we have gone down this route of getting an external candidate, and with question marks surrounding both Sargent and Sainz, who we know there's been interest on both players, with Angus Gunn leaving as well, and not a clear goalkeeper coming up to fill his boots, it could be a disastrous campaign for Norwich next season. But also they could have a good summer, a good manager, and we could soar up the table, sort of similar to what we did under Daniel Farke. But we are the enigma next season of the Championship. We could go either way. But for our sakes, I hope we actually finish in the top half rather than have another season of mediocrity or worse next season.
Yeah, I just went 12, just due to the fact that I thought across the whole season, really, there was so much change. There was a new manager, a new sport director, obviously. That was like his first season in charge. New owners, Didier leaving. There was just so much change. I just thought as well as that. I just thought we brought so many players who were so young as well. And I just think that just does bring inconsistency, right? And that was my main reason why I went for 12. I know we had quality, but I just didn't feel like we would maybe marinate as a group well enough to kind of really, really make a case for the playoffs.
One thing I will ask you quickly, Will, I know we need to move on, but you were obviously the closest out of all of us. You picked Norwich to finish 12th, we finished 13th. In your world, where Norwich City finished 12th, would Johannes Hoftorp have been sacked? At the start of the season, this is, not at the start of the season when you predicted Norwich 12th.
Well, I think personally, what I said at the start of the season is all I take at Norwich after such real horrid football for the last 3 years. I just wanted a real good coherent play style that excited me, and to an extent, I did get that. To be fair, so maybe I should have thought maybe he should have stayed personally, but I think if Norwich had that run of form which we had in the autumn and obviously into the new year, where like we beat the likes of Coventry during the winter, but also the likes of Hull and Watford right at the start of the season. If those games are more, if those games occurred more towards the back end of the season, I think there would have probably been much more optimism. But unfortunately, football doesn't work like that. My overall opinion about JHT getting sacked, I still personally thought it was harsh. I know I probably am being very maybe controversial there, but I just think he had many factors kind of in his way, really, and I just do generally think I just felt a bit sorry for him overall. But yeah, if Norwich finished 12th at the start of the season, and there was signs of us playing some good football, I would have probably have kept him, yeah, because I feel like there's much more other issues which obviously I'll talk about in the next videos coming up.
Yeah, no. So we do move on now from Norwich, and we go to above them, and now sort of the top half of the table. And it begins with Sheffield Wednesday, who ended up in 12th. I thought they'd be 10th. Matthew was spot on. He thought that they would finish 12th. Will had them as sort of an outside playoff contender in 7th. Same for Jack and Henry in 9th. Just again, a team who have got a very good manager. Danny Roll is superb. I think the job in which he has done with Sheffield Wednesday after they were promoted, and he kept them up convincingly, and he's made them better. They are really, if anything, maybe they're overachieving a little bit with Danny Roll as manager. But I think mid-table, a lot would have expected them to be there. I thought they might just sneak a little bit up higher in the table, but no, a solid outfit, a strong championship team with a strong championship manager. And yeah, I think 12th is a very fair league sort of reflection of what they are.
And I think they have evolved into one of the standard championship clubs. And I think Danny Roll has got them playing, an effective style of championship football, as we saw on 2 occasions this season. Obviously, players like Josh Windass, who was linked to Santos, of all places, but no, decided to stay at Hillsborough. But yeah, a decent season for them. Obviously, a huge improvement. At no point were they ever in any relegation trouble. But I kind of the kind of, as Henry alluded to, the football hipsters who had them tickling the playoffs. I didn't see that as being. I thought there'd be much bigger, better clubs out there, and yeah, I mean it's quite a way away from the playoffs. But again, I was sort of half right.
Yeah, I think Jack's sort of spot on there. I think people who were maybe seeing them knocking on the door for playoffs were just doing it because of Danny Roll. And I admit I probably did get caught up in Danny Roll fever as well. But no, Sheffield Wednesday finished 12th. Great season for them. And I've sort of said all I really need to say about Sheffield Wednesday when I was speaking about QPR earlier. But I will call it the Omni rumour because it's never seen to go away. But it does look like Danny Roll maybe will be at Southampton next season. He's been linked with them all season, and of course they're now in the hunt for a manager. So it might be quite difficult if Sheffield Wednesday have to appoint someone and fill in Danny Roll's boots because he's one of the best managers they've had in recent years. But I fully expect Sheffield Wednesday to be around that mid-table slot again next season. Unless they appoint someone who really doesn't know what they're doing, I fully expect them to sort of stay where they are, really. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Sheffield Wednesday and the situation there, I guess.
I just believed, I think, in their massive volume of signings. I think they brought like 10 plus players, and I thought if you combine those new players, Danny Rolls, obviously, tactical flexibility and quality as well, and obviously Hillsborough as well, and when it gets rocking as well, I thought all those factors might combine into a playoff push. But obviously, I think they're probably just a bit too short, really.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough as I struggle to find my unmute button there. But no, we'll move on further up the table. We'll go up to 11th and we'll go to Swansea City, perhaps a bit higher than quite a few people would have predicted. But as for us, Will got it spot on. Will thought Swansea would be 11th. He was spot on. Jack had a little bit of a hooner. He thought they'd be 21st. Matthew was very close. He went with 10th. Me and Henry went with 19th. Now, my thought process behind Swansea, much like I have said with Stoke, and also, I've forgotten the other side I said it for, but another QPR, another team who, after being relegated, really struggled. Apart from the season where we won the league the second time when they got playoffs, they've really struggled. They haven't been a strong outfit in this division, and I thought that they would be, again, sort of accustomed to a lower mid-table finish. Again, her side who have got enough quality to compete at the level, but not enough to push on and be a top side. But no, it ended up in 11th and did a decent job. It gave a good account of themselves and sort of solidify themselves as the pride of Welsh football, I guess you could call them. But no, they have ended up doing quite well for themselves, and no, they proved me wrong and a couple of us wrong.
Yeah, I might have been a bit harsh on Swansea, but I also said that I didn't back Luke Williams, who was sacked halfway through the season, so bonus points for that, I guess. They've done a lot better than what I thought. Obviously, they've got some decent young talents coming through. Again, another team that turned up to Carrow Road and looked fairly defensively open. I think that was one of Luke Williams' last games in charge for Swansea. I think they're going to look forward to having a different Welsh derby next season. Not a kind of a South Coast affair. It'll be North versus South. But who's their manager at the moment? Alan Sheehan, or someone. I've never even heard of him, to be fair. So I don't know if I presume he's their permanent manager. So I don't know if they're looking for another coach or not. But yeah, I think it was 10 places above where I put them. So I do apologise, Swansea, but I do also echo what Freddie said, that it felt like a big club out of the Prem, rotting a little bit. So, they've done much better than I thought.
I mean, this has been quite a weird season for Swansea because they've had a managerial sacking and they've never really sort of taken any headlines, but they've just gone about their business the right way. Alan Sheehan has clearly had an impact, although I'm in Jack Wright's camp. I don't really know who Alan Sheehan is, to be honest with you. But they've undoubtedly had a good season, proved all of us wrong with a top half finish. Quietly gone around their business. I think players like Harry Darling as well are real assets for Swansea. But it'll be interesting to see where they go next, because I do still think with the squad they've got and with the coaches they've got, 11th is probably a bit of an overachievement for them now.
This one was so fluky because I really like Luke Williams, and I obviously watched back the video, and I was just literally just hyping him up to be the next coming of Pep. But in all seriousness, they did have some factors which did made me a bit excited about them. Obviously, as Henry said there in Harry Darling. Obviously, they had Matt Grimes at the time as well, and that as well, Franco midfield as well. So I did see some real promise there, but I can't lie that I have literally been so lucky there. I would never have called seeing Alan Sheehan or whoever it is, obviously, in the dugout come the end of the season. But I think if Swansea are to progress as a club, obviously, who knows how much money they're going to get now due to big old Luka Modric coming into the building. But anyway, yeah, I think the next growth point for Swansea is if they can try and build off that sort of midfield core of Franco, and maybe even sort of like if they can get maybe Lewis O'Brien back, that'd be great. But I just think they need to probably invest in some better attackers really for them to maybe finish in a similar position next season.
We'll wait and see on if they do, but we'll move on with this season and our predictions. We'll go to Middlesbrough, a team who I think everyone would have expected to do a lot better than what they ended up sort of mustering up at the end of the season. They ended up finishing in 10th. So you look at our predictions. I had Middlesbrough in the playoffs, as I had them in 6th. Henry and Will had them in the playoffs in 4th and 5th, respectively. Jack had them just outside in 7th. Matthew had them in 5th. And thinking behind this was Middlesbrough have been a top side in this division for the last sort of 6 or 7 years. They're always right up there competing, and they look like that they will get in the playoffs. They will be up there, but then out of nowhere, they fall off. They slowly lose a bit of momentum, and that's exactly what happened to them this season. You know, again in terms of individual quality, brilliant side. You know, you just look at the game against us at Carrow Road, a frantic affair. They were 3-1 up in it, and Norwich somehow salvaged a point. Maybe could have got all 3 if it weren't for a Kenny McLean red card. But Middlesbrough, fantastic side, and under Michael Carrick and his sort of style of football, it's a match made in heaven, really. They're such a brilliant team to watch. And no, I thought that they were, if anything, I think they were my outside shout for actually getting promoted. But no, obviously they ended up missing out on the playoffs, and they were unfortunate too. But no, we all thought really, apart from you, Jack, that they would be in the playoffs, they'd be up there competing, and they somehow ended up in 10th.
Which they were fighting for the playoffs for a lot of this season, and as you said, it's a spectacular drop-off. But you look at the quality of players that they have. Iheanacho up front. That's where they had Illing Jr. on loan from Villa. Obviously got Morgan Whittaker in January as well. But yeah, I also called out that Latte Lath would be a Golden Boot contender. He obviously got sold to, I can't remember who, someone in the MLS in January. So he obviously wasn't there to bang in the goals for them. I even forgot Ben Doak, who was, unplayable against us in that 3-3 at Carrow Road. This really is quite a worrying position for Middlesbrough. And I think, again, Michael Carrick, I think he's been in the job for at least 3 seasons now. And every sort of season or so, they seem to have been building in the right direction. This feels like a real step in the wrong direction, especially given the backing that they had and the strength of the squad. But just kind of looking at their badge, I've never even noticed, is it like a lion on their badge? What or a dragon or something? It looks like a lion, but another word is a fat cat. Our sponsors of this video are the Fat Cat and Canary. Thank you for being our fantastic sponsor. And if you're in the fine city of Norwich, or wanting a beer for whatever reason you want, pop in during their opening hours, of course. Don't break in the middle of the night. But yes, thank you, Fat Cat and Canary. Anyway, Henry, would you like to talk about Middlesbrough now?
Oh, well, I'll start it by saying if only Middlesbrough had rivals who we haven't got to yet, whose nickname were the Black Cats, who probably would have gone better for a Fat Cat pun. But no, I think in terms of Middlesbrough, you're spot on there. They were in playoff contention for the majority of the season and then did just really tail away. And I think Michael Carrick, on the whole, has done an all right job at Middlesbrough. He did get them into the playoffs 2 years ago. I think they lost to Coventry in the playoff semi-finals 2 years ago and then didn't get it last season, of course. And this season, again, they're fallen short. And it does feel like things have stagnated with Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough are one of those teams who are always going to be a big club in the Championship, and they'll demand that, sort of similar to what Ben Napper was saying, really, in regards to Norwich, they'll demand that their team are in and around the playoff spots, and that hasn't happened this season. So I will be very shocked if they do stick with Michael Carrick, but no doubt that they'll be pushing for top six again next season.
Yeah, I've got quite a harsh verdict about Borough, actually, because I do maintain the fact that I think when they are hot, I think they are definitely a top two side when they play really well. I think back to the Luton game as well. I just think overall the quality of their squad, Carrick should be doing much, much better than that, I'm afraid. I'm actually quite surprised he hasn't been sacked yet, honestly. But I think in Carrick's defence, I did think he's had a lot of injuries all season. There was many times, again, when you would load up FootMob and you'll still see Johnny Howson playing centre half. I was like, poor Johnny, you know what I mean? But there you go. Yeah, I think if Borough had players fit, I think they'll probably definitely be in the top six because they've got some real good talented players there. The likes of Azaz and Conway were very impressive this season. And I love the double pivot of Hayden Hackney and Aidan Morris as well. So there was some real good positive things there for Borough. But I think Carrick will be very annoyed that he didn't get that side top six.
Yeah, he should have done, really. We've mentioned the players and the quality that Borough have got. And no, they perhaps should have done better, but no, they didn't, hence why they ended up in 10th. But we move up to a team you could probably say the exact same for in 9th, West Bromwich Albion, who, of course, as just said, finished in 9th. I was relatively close. I thought they would finish 7th. Matthew thought West Brom would be champions. That's a very interesting shout. Jack went with 5th in the playoffs. Henry went with West Brom in 3rd, which, sort of with the benefit of hindsight is a bit of an odd shout. Will went with them in 6th. Now, for me with West Brom, I knew they would compete because, again, as we have just said with Middlesbrough, really good side with a really good manager. Carlos Corberán is such a highly admired coach, and with rightful reason. He has done brilliant things in this league with every team he's been at. Look at what he did with Huddersfield and now what he's done with West Brom. They are a very good side with a lot of good players. In fact, it's amazing, actually. They ended up in 9th. You think of a team with that calibre and such a good manager. How on earth did they not end up in the top 6? But they were one of those sort of 5 teams that it could have been on some of the last games of the season. A really good side who are consistently up there fighting and look as if they could have done it. But I thought they would just about miss out on playoffs because of consistency. West Brom are a team who, for me, always seem to, they seem to be, when they're on it, they always are. They go on insane runs of form. But when they slip off, they really curtail and they struggle. So that's why I thought they would just about miss out. And, it sort of came into fruition. They had good runs where they were in the playoffs comfortably, and they ended up just not having enough to get there in the end. They didn't have the momentum, and they ended up 9th. So, but no, everyone else here thought it was playoffs, or if your Matthew is not here, he thought they'd go all the way. So I'll pass it over to you again as to why. Well, what were your thoughts on West Brom's position?
Well, it's where, again, they were for most of the season. So, unfortunately, this video isn't based on where the team was for all the season, and also that's not how the table works. Yeah, obviously, one thing I called out in my prediction was that I thought that Danny Roll might leave midway through the season to go to like a Bundesliga team, or a Marty Cifuentes might go to like a La Liga team halfway through the season. In the end, it was Carlos Corberán who went to Valencia, who's also like rescued them from a really dire relegation situation, and now they're comfortably clear in La Liga, I think. So yeah, quality manager, quality player. And Josh Madger early doors was banging them in and on the tail of Borja signs. And again, Tony Mowbray came in, did okay. The fans really welcomed him, and the wheels came off the West Brom wagon. Again, sort of very, very much short of that fifth position that I thought that they would. Again, hugely disappointing. Much like us, in a boat where it's like, well, where do we go now? What is the next appointment? Do we keep up this kind of momentum of being near the playoffs, or do we fall off like a Stoke or a Watford? But yeah, it's a question mark. Manager coming in, is West Brom an enticing proposition? Are they a big enough football club, a big enough institution to warrant a big manager? Could you see someone like Sean Dyche coming in at West Brom? Is that not the most West Brom appointment? I'm calling it now. If West Brom appoint Sean Dyche, you all owe me £10.
In a similar way to what we've just said about Middlesbrough, West Brom are one of the biggest teams in the Championship, and they always are whenever they're in this division, and their fans will demand top six football. They did fall short, but as Jack was saying, it just shows what a great manager they had in Carlos Corberán. And I believe in the predictions video, I said they had one of, if not the best manager in the league. And that's why I predicted them to finish as high as third. But they would have got playoffs, in my opinion, had Corberán have not left. But, anyone is going to swap a basically Birmingham for sunny Valencia, aren't they? And the job he's done at Valencia has shown, and I feel vindicated that I said that about Corberán, and he's gone on to do a really good job at Valencia. But I think I feel sorry a bit for Corberán in the fact that he couldn't necessarily see out that time at West Brom, but of course when Valencia called, he had to go. And I do feel a little bit sorry for Tony Mowbray, as Jack said. West Brom fans welcomed him with open arms. He'd managed West Brom before, and I even think he won promotion to the Premier League as West Brom manager before. So here's someone who's a club legend who the West Bromwich Albion fans love. And of course, with the year he's been through, he had to step down as Birmingham City manager as well because of health issues. So the fact that he's even back out and managing again, massive fair play to Tony Mowbray. But the results did nosedive, and that is why Tony Mowbray is no longer West Bromwich Albion manager. But I think no matter who they get in the summer, they'll be competing again. And I'll be very shocked if they're not at least in the playoff conversation next season.
Yeah, I think West Brom would have finished top six if their away form was much better. I think they only picked up, I don't know when they last picked up an away win, but I think it was a very, very long time ago. I did see somewhere, but I can't remember the date. But essentially, West Brom's away form was about as bleak as Jack's current Luton right now. So that's probably how I would describe West Brom's away form this season. And I think that was probably the main reason why we didn't just get into the top six. Too many draws at home, and I think just too many defeats on the road.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. No, it's completely fair enough. But we move on now to a side who, 2 seasons ago, I think needed a point on the final day to end up in the playoffs, as Jack is turning his light on. But we go up to Millwall. We were all there on Easter Monday. Oh, no, please don't start that again. That was horrible hearing that for 90 minutes. Well, if you're Henry, you heard it for 60 minutes because of club.
And Will
Will as well. Yeah, but no, we go on to Millwall, the team who ended up in 8th place. For predictions, yeah, it weren't great. I had Millwall 15th, Henry had them 12th, Will 17th, Jack 16th, Matthew in 18th. Thinking behind it, Millwall are just your average championship team. They've been there for a while, and that's where they usually end up. You know, they are a side who will get good results at home because they have got one of the most notorious home crowds backing them at a notorious stadium at the Den. But away from home, you know, you think on paper they're going to struggle a little bit because they don't have the same amount of noise and backing. But no, they did well to get up in 8th. They were, I think it was only really until the last 2 games of the season where they were genuinely in with a proper chance of being a playoff side. So massive credit to them. But we all know about Alex Neil as a championship manager. He is a top manager at this level, and he's capable of pulling off some miracles. He almost did with Millwall if he got them in there, but they just didn't have enough in the end. Injuries cost them near the end of the season. You know, they had 2 goalkeeper injuries right near the end. So, you know, they curtailed a little bit, but very respectable to finish in 8th place.
Yeah, and as Henry pointed out, and as I regaled from rewatching the video, I said that Millwall could either finish right down near the bottom or up near the playoffs. So I kind of sort of predicted it, but obviously I didn't back it, so it doesn't count. Yeah, again, I echo what you said, Freddie. I think as soon as Alex Neil came in, Millwall were a much better outfit and were really, in amongst that playoff push. I don't know how I didn't see this coming. Millwall always do this. They always sort of like, oh, we're going to make the playoffs. We're going to make the playoffs. Oh, no, we missed. Oh, no. Oh, well, next season, lads. But yeah, players like Tanganga were fantastic. Ivanovic, right at the end, obviously scored, as we all saw with our own eyes in that lovely afternoon at the Den. But yes, as a thunderstorm rolls overhead in Southend, Millwall were electric towards the very end. But yeah,
that's a red card saying that, mate. Honestly, you can't get away with that.
What, linking a thunderstorm and form? That's what I'm. So if my internet cuts off, it's because I've been struck by lightning. But anyway, Henry, enough meteorological chat. Less meteorological, more Millwall-logical.
Yeah. Cool. Let's get away from those awful puns as quickly as possible. But no, I think I've got the Millwall team in front of me now, and they've built such a strong core and foundation. It will shock me if they're not up there next season. So Ivanovic, he was great for them. I think even someone like Macaulay Langstaff, he took a while to really get going, but then did get amongst the goals after his step up from Notts County as well. George Saville, you know what you're going to get with him. Such a good player at this level, and Romain Esse as well, who I believe is Crystal Palace bound. So yeah, he's a player that will be playing Premier League football next season. So yeah, really solid outfit, and sort of similar to what Jack was saying. How did we not see this? I feel like Alex Neil is a very good coach. How did we not really see this coming? The reason why I thought they finished 12th is because Millwall are always a good side, but not good enough for the playoffs. And I guess you have to cram so many teams in. I just thought 12th would be a good position from them, but no, they were within touch and distance of the playoffs again and finished 8th, which for them is a very good season.
I'm sorry to butt in. Romain Esse is actually already at Crystal Palace. He left Millwall in January, so yeah, he's already there. I think he actually played for them today against Tottenham for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I just think a trend about the league this season is that if you have quite a good, reliable defence and you have midfielders who are also well enough to kind of back the defenders as well, then I think you're in for a good season, as Henry outlined there, and also Jack. Tanganga, absolutely fantastic season alongside Jake Cooper. And then above those two, obviously Savile and also the likes of Casper De Norre as well. So they've got a very, very good side brewing there. I'll be very, very interested to see how they go this summer. I think they're kind of changing their transfer policy now to have a bit more younger players, especially kind of in a similar ilk actually to obviously Romain Esse as well. So we'll see what happens there. I feel it might go maybe a bit more downhill next season, just due to the caliber of teams, obviously coming up, and also coming down as well. But we'll see how they get on.
Now we move on to the top 7. These were this is the side who just missed out of the playoffs in 7th, and this is by far our worst prediction collectively. Blackburn Rovers. I don't really want to flash up the graphic of where we put them because it's bad. It's very, very bad. I had them to just about stay up in 21st. Henry had them relegated in 23rd. Will went with 20th. Jack 19th. Matthew had them relegated in 22nd. Of course, that didn't happen. My thinking with Blackburn was they had just lost Sammy Schmodix. Although he played, I think he played the first 2 or 3 games of the season, they lost him. And I thought instantly, wow, that's a 30-goal player of last season you no longer have. That I thought in my head, where on earth are the goals going to come from? Blackburn, the season prior, just about stayed up. I think it was the final day they had to beat Leicester, and they did, and they stayed up. And just I thought it straight away with Schmodix going, and they didn't really at the time, in my opinion, didn't bring in the quality to replace him. I thought they were destined for a really poor season, but I thought they would do just enough to stay up. Yeah, they completely threw that out of the window. John Eustace, at the start of the season before he was dismissed, had them on fire. He had them playing brilliant football, getting some great results. They came to Carrow Road, I think, 5th game of the season, and gave Norwich a proper competitive match. It was a really good game of football. And then Valerian Ismail came in, had a shocking start, really bad start, which is probably what cost Blackburn that really, I think his first 6 games as manager, or 7 matches, I think they lost 6. Who did they draw against in that 6 with a last-minute goal after conceding in the last minute? You guessed it, Norwich. But anyway, we'll move on. No, I think that's what cost Blackburn at the end, just a dreadful run. They talk about a new manager bounce. That was a new manager flop, if anything, for Ishmael. But they started picking up. They got a few points near the end, but no, it cost them. But we were nowhere near. We were absolutely nowhere near. And now we have to swallow a little bit of humble pie.
Yeah, I mean, an improvement on nearly getting relegated. I mean, I'm literally clutching at straws here. Yeah, Eustace came in and obviously did a fantastic job and made them one of the playoff sides for a lot of the campaign. Obviously, the bizarre decision to go to Derby, like you said, exactly curtailed their season. It's kind of weirdly annoying because I think they're unbeaten in their last 5. So Ishmael, obviously, he finally got some form, finally got a good running start. But then, it's weird because Rovers fans, they're probably, over the moon that they're nowhere near the relegation mire, and weren't ever near the relegation mire for any of the season, but they just missed out on the playoffs in position, probably the most frustrating position in the Championship. Were they ready for Premier League football? No. Will they be ready for Premier League football next season? Who knows? Maybe Todd Cantwell will, be Ballon d'Or worthy and will pull out like 40 assists or something. But again, a back 4 that consisted of centre-backs of Danny Bart and Dominic Hyam. Again, kind of what Will said earlier, if you've got a weirdly solid defence, that'll do you good.
Yeah, and I think with Blackburn, Jack basically said all that was needed to be said, as well as you, Freddie, in terms of what they did last season. As you said, stayed up on the final day. factor in them losing Sammy Schmodix as well. I'm not going to say who he went to, but factor in that he was flirting with that team and going there all summer, and he did end up there. It just the writing was on the wall for them to have a bad season. But of course, John Eustace does what John Eustace does best and get teams playing really good football at this level and gets results. And the job he did at Blackburn was brilliant. And he obviously made the decision to leave Blackburn and the project he'd started to build there and go to Derby. He was vindicated in that with Derby staying up. But Valerian Ismail, this is someone who's experienced promotion with Watford. It was always going to be difficult for him to come in and fill Eustace's boots. And as you said, Freddie, he had an awful run to start his tenure, but did pick it up towards the end. And I don't know. It's a difficult one based on how they finished the season, because you could say, under Eustace they were good, but under Ishmael they were bad. But of course, it's not that black and white, because they did start to pick up again under Ishmael. But again, they're sort of similar to Norwich. They're an enigma. It'll be really interesting to see what happens to Blackburn next season.
Yeah, so my rationale about Blackburn was I thought, the main reason why I actually put them to stay up was just due to John Eustace, and the guy has just thought to himself, you know what, I can keep these guys up, I can push playoffs. So fair play to him. I think he's been absolutely brilliant, and I just think he's a very, very good asset for this league, and I could see him maybe could go on to better things after next season, but we'll see. But I think Eustace has to take some major, major plaudits for his job at Blackburn.
He certainly does. No, they did a great job and set the foundation, but they couldn't quite make it. But a team who did make it on the final day, and they had their semi-final, looks as if it's a bit doom and gloom for them. It's Bristol City, who shocked everyone finishing 6th under Liam Manning. They certainly shocked us lot. Well, I sort of saw a bit of a rise up the table coming. I had them in 8th. Henry had them 15th. Will 10th. Jack in 12th. Matthew in 11th, which is fair. It's Bristol City. They always finish 11th or 12th with Preston next to them, but not this season. I thought, based off the year prior and sort of how they began to be on the up with Liam Manning, who has done nothing short of exceptional since he came in at Bristol City. A Norfolk boy. So if it goes wrong in the second leg, come to Norfolk, please. I wouldn't mind it, but I doubt he will. But no, they, again, a team who have got some really good players. They proved that against us. They ended the year-long Carrow Road unbeaten run. They beat Norwich at Ashton Gate, but Norwich had a certain player in goal, so I think it's fair enough. Actually, he was in goal for both of them, so I think, it is fair enough. But no, it's a weird one with Bristol City. I thought they would certainly compete because they've got a manager who plays really good football, and they've got the squad that can do better than maybe what you think. And that's exactly what happened. They end up in the playoffs. They're probably not going to Wembley. They've got a major mountain to climb at Bramall Lane. But no, I thought that they would do okay. But 6th place, never would have dreamed of a team like Bristol City being up there. But credit to them, because they deserve it based off the season. They were very good. They were on it throughout a majority of the 46 games.
And they snuck in. Like we were saying about Blackburn, West Brom, Middlesbrough, sitting in that playoff position for most of the season, Bristol City have capitalised on their failures by just being fairly consistent. And obviously beat us twice in the second game. It was obviously in a very good run of form for them. In my prediction, I kind of said that there wasn't any fantastic individuals. I think players like Josh Knight, Anis Mehmeti, they've really kind of kicked on and are kind of growing. Naki Wells is still a championship bagsman. Didn't see that coming. But yeah, it's all Liam Manning, and it's all that style of play. Again, like you said, it's going to be a tough playoff second leg for them. But yeah, another season in the championship, if they manage to keep him. If we don't manage to poach Liam Manning, which we definitely won't.
I do hope Bristol City can kick on from this next season, because it does look like they're going to crash out to Sheffield United in the playoffs. But no, what Liam Manning has done is nothing short of exceptional, as you said, Freddie. To get a team like Bristol City, who have been mid-table fodder for, well, probably the last decade, and get them into the playoffs and have real hope of Premier League football is extraordinary. So hopefully they can kick on. It will be difficult. It's going to be a much tougher league next season, I think, but hopefully Bristol City can push on, because I'd love to see them in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think one thing which made Bristol City probably maybe go from mid-table to playoffs was they're managing to really beat those maybe quite average sides at home. So I think last season, before obviously this one, we saw the likes of, I think Bristol City beat the likes of Southampton and Leicester at home, but they could beat beat the likes of like the relegation threatened sides. But this year they had an absolutely fantastic home record, and I think that's down to Liam Manning, a very good tactician there for sure. And just a word, actually, I think Jack actually touched on it, but Jason Knight, for me, wow, he's been incredible. He's played every game for them this season. I think also every minute as well. So that's a fantastic effort. And for me, he's been the most underrated player of the season.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually, every single minute. Not a single Norwich player managed to do that. So, no, fair play to him. It's a good accolade to have up your sleeve. But we move on to another side who lost in their playoff semi-final, but it was close. And really, them getting into the playoffs, we all expected it. It's Coventry City. This was the only team I got bang on. So I had Coventry in 5th. Henry had them to just miss out in 7th. Matthew got it spot on with them in 5th. Will had them 3rd. I believe Will said they were his outside shout to get promoted. And then Jack had them in 4th. Now, I am very happy because it's the only one I got right. And so I can just back what I thought at the start of the season, which is Coventry are a very strong outfit at Championship level. They have been in the playoffs for 2 of the last 3 seasons. They're always a top side, and you worry when you play against them because they've got quality all over the pitch. You know, maybe defensively they leave themselves a little bit open with the sort of system they play with a back 5, or at least with what Mark Robins did before he was so unfairly sacked. I know Henry said it as this was the sort of motif of the video, but no, that was by far for me, I think, the harshest sacking of the season in Mark Robins. But no, I thought Cardiff, what on earth am I on about? Coventry, sorry. No, I thought they were going to be up there because you just look at their attack. Sakamoto, Haji Wright, I'm pretty sure Thomas Asante left before the season began for West Brom, so I was about to say him, but obviously not. But no, just even those two there, just so good. Really fantastic players. They brought in Matt Grimes in midfield, who helps sort of steady the ship a bit. Of course, Norwich took 6 points off them, which is quite funny, but it took probably the most dogged performance of Norwich's season away at Coventry to get 3 points, and then just some absolute magic from Amankwa Forson to beat them at Carrow Road. But no, a team who everyone, I think, thought were going to be right up there. And under Frank Lampard, you know, for considering his sort of managerial struggles over the last few years, no, he's done a fantastic job to get them in there and solidify it. So I think Coventry very well deserved, and based off what they have, 5th was exactly where they belong. They are a playoff team who will always be up there.
Yeah, and I think ultimately Frank Lampard is the reason why they're there. You know, Robins did have Coventry flailing towards kind of the start of the season, but you know, like you said, the quality was always there. It was a case of putting the pieces together. I think exactly like you said, the acquisition of Matt Grimes was, you know, possibly the most important signing, at least of the January window. But yeah, the players that they've just been slowly developing over the last couple of years, just to, you know, add a couple of extra names like Ben Sheaf and Milan van Ewijk. Those two are probably near enough Premier League quality already now. And again, have they shot themselves in the foot with their home tie in the playoffs? Well, it'll be a big game at the Stadium of Light. But yeah, I think again they've kicked on. I was one place off, so I'm not that disconsolate.
Yeah, with Coventry, they were similar to Luton in the fact that they had both sides had managers who'd built something and built a legacy. Obviously, Rob Edwards getting Luton into the Premier League for the first time and sort of capitalising on their rise up the divisions. And then you had Coventry under Mark Robbins, and he'd been on that journey with them, taking them from the League 2 playoff final to one kick away from the Premier League. So for him to go, it was incredibly harsh. But the difference between Coventry and Luton is that Coventry capitalised on it, and they appointed someone in Frank Lampard who has managed at Premier League level to varying degrees of success, and who very much had a point to prove. And I think it was that point to prove that actually attracted him to Coventry, a side that were a kick away from the FA Cup final last season and who were in and around the playoffs. They are a very attractive side to go to. So I think he was all in on the project at Coventry. And I think if you look at the league table, since Frank Lampard became Coventry manager, they're one of the top sides in the division, and the job he's done has been brilliant as well. So it wouldn't surprise me, although they lost the first leg at home to Sunderland in the playoff semi-finals, it still wouldn't surprise me if they're a Premier League team next season. I think I'm not ruling them out turning that around and then winning the playoff final. I think they're that good, and especially under Frank Lampard and the job he's done this season. So yeah, I think Coventry will probably be a Premier League side sooner rather than later, but whether it's this summer or not remains to be seen.
I'm with Henry, actually. I actually backed them for the playoffs as well. But I think Frank's just come in and he's just got his best players in the best roles. So if you look at the team across the whole season, probably more so attacking-wise, you look at spells where Ephraim Mason-Clark was probably the best player in the league. I would probably argue right now Jack Redoney probably one of the best players in the league. They've all had, I think a few of their players have all had spells would have been probably one of the best players in the league. And I just think during those important moments of the season, I think, although it felt like maybe Coventry might have peaked too early, I just think those moments of quality from those players has probably just kept them alive and kicking, really. They've got a great attacking side. They score loads of goals, but I just think if they aren't to make it to Wembley, I think obviously, as we saw obviously last week, that it could be defensive issues which may affect them, really. But overall, a good squad and a good spine. Obviously, I said before the season, I thought it's probably be Robbins that would be the guy in charge right now, but obviously it's Lampard, and fair play to him. He's done very, very well, and I think he's got his best players firing.
Yeah, on to another team who got a new manager in and really kicked on and did very well. It's Sunderland. Now, I think, again, this is where our sort of predictions go backwards a little bit, because no one, I think, would have predicted what Sunderland went on to do. They finished fourth. They were there pretty much all season. So they did really well under Reggie Labrie to get there. In terms of predictions, yeah, no one thought they would get anywhere near it. I had Sunderland in 13th, as did Jack. Matthew had them 14th. Henry had them 12th. Will had them 9th. Now, for me, with this was obviously Sunderland has Jack's got a very big wince on his face seeing his prediction back. But for me, it was based off of last season. You know, Sunderland lost some good players over the course of the summer. They lost Jack Clark to a certain team down the road. They didn't have they also didn't have Ross Stewart anymore, who went on to Southampton, albeit that was last season. But based off how many injuries he got, they actually did well to get rid of him in hindsight. But no, I thought Sunderland were again just destined for a mid-table year, because they have good quality. You know, their whole transfer policy is bringing in players under the age of 24, and they end up actually surprisingly kicking on quite quickly, and they're backed by a manager who believes in them. And you know, they saw it with Tony Mowbray, they saw it with Reggie Lebris. You know, he came in after being relegated with Lorient in Ligue 1 last season, and this year it's been amazing what Sunderland have achieved with such a young team and players who came out of nowhere. You look at the two who scored against Coventry in the playoffs recently, in Wilson Isidore and Eliza Mayenda. They're players who were playing, you know, Isidore was out playing in Russia, Mayenda was playing in the lower leagues of Spanish football. And so, no, they have done, their recruitment has been fantastic, and even their own academy players coming into the team. You know, Tom, I think his name's Tom Watson, he's off to Brighton for, I think it's just shy of £15 million. Chris Rigg has been phenomenal. Job Bellingham, who they got off of Birmingham, has been absolutely scintillating to watch. So no, that they have completely overachieved in my eyes. But no, I expected a decent year because they're too good to be in a relegation battle. But I didn't think they'd be good enough to be up in the playoffs. But lo and behold, I think that they didn't drop out of the top six at any time at all over the course of the season.
And at the time of recording, Henry coined it the Reggie Lebris Hate Club. I was very scathing in terms of my thoughts on him and the appointment, and it kind of had the same whiff of a Tim Volter. Obviously, that didn't work out for him, and it absolutely did work out for Sunderland. And whoever runs the Youth Sunderland account, if there's a Mackham Will, they're probably salivating right now. Like you said, all those young players coming through, being the absolute core of the team. Obviously, you've got players like Patrick Roberts all of a sudden turning out to be really good. Again, kind of their form curtailed slightly towards the end of the season, but like you said, in and around, they didn't really move outside of third or fourth most of the season. Obviously, trounced us just before Christmas. And again, I think they'll take a lot of headlines, obviously, for that Englishman in their midfield who has a similar name to another guy who plays for Real Madrid, who might also be his brother. They might, get some headlines there. But yeah, again, they're in a very good position in their playoff. But again, out of the teams that are in that mix, would you want to see Sunderland back in the Prem? Maybe. I mean, more so than the team that finished third.
Yeah, I echo that. And I think the reason why I put them just above mid-table was probably because of the Reggie Lebris factor. It was they'd had such an awful season last season under Mick Beale, but such a good team. It was like, okay, well, all Reggie Lebris needs to do is come in and steady the ship, and they should be fine, and they should be knocking on the door for playoffs. Little did I expect for them to blow teams away and be one of the best teams in the division, because that's what they were, as you both alluded to. They didn't really drop out of the top six all season, and at time of recording they're currently leading Coventry in the playoff semi-finals, so they have every chance of being in the Premier League next season. And I think, yes, their form did take a little bit of a dip in the second half of the season. That's because they were that good. They knew they were going to be in the playoffs, and they knew they probably couldn't compete with the top two or top three, but knew they were going to be in the playoffs as well. So they were the ultimate fourth place team this season, and that's exactly where they finished. But look, I think we all made a lot of headlines this season where there was a quote that Johannes Hoftorp made in one of his press conferences after one of the games, where he says it's Norwich's job to develop players for Norwich and for other clubs. I feel like Sunderland are at that stage, as you alluded to. Tom Watson, he's off to the Premier League with Brighton for a fee between 10 to 15 million pounds, and he's young. You've got Chris Rigg, who's a 17-year-old, and the fact that he's done what he's done this season at the age of 17 is astronomical. And then, of course, you've got Joe Bellingham. These aren't just the future of Sunderland that we're dealing with. They're the future of British football, really. And they're all in the same team. You know, make no mistake about it. Apparently, Borussia Dortmund have already inquired about Joe Bellingham, so he might follow a similar path to his brother. Who knows? But yeah, I can very much see the core of British football from this Sunderland team. So I do worry maybe if they don't go up, just because they might be in a similar situation to Norwich, where they struggle to keep hold of the like of Riggs and Bellingham. But hopefully, for me, if they don't go up this season, then they're my favourites to win the league next season, because they were just that good this season.
Yeah, I think Sunderland had a lot of players, but they kind of brought them all together at the same time. And I think of the likes of Trey Hume and obviously Dennis Serkin as well. Just two examples. And I think all those guys have had maybe now like 2 years in the Championship, and they've all developed really at the same kind of time. And I think that's probably helped them kind of grow as a group. I do still think they are a bit streaky, but that should not discount how well the Breeds done this season for me.
Yeah, no, it's completely fair enough. No, they had a great season and could end up in the playoff final, could end up in the Premier League. But let's go on to another team who are, well, they almost have a foot in the playoff final in Sheffield United. They ended up finishing in third after a measly relegation from the Premier League where they conceded over 100 goals. So they hit back in good fashion. They ended up in third. No one got it spot on in terms of predictions. I was one spot off with thinking they'd be fourth. Matthew there with a very, very interesting prediction of 13th in the league. Jack had them in 6th in the playoffs. Henry had them in 5th. Will had them to miss out in the playoffs and had them in 8th. So 2 people there who thought Sheffield United were going to sort of continue to fall off. But for me, I thought that they would be right up there. You know, they are a strong team at this level. They have been since sort of 2019. You know, they are a very good side, and the relegated teams from the Premier League always seem to bounce back straight away, and it looks like they will do that. No, so I expected them to do so because the quality of the team is still phenomenal. There are some great players in there. Harrison Burrows has been fantastic since joining from Peterborough. You've got the likes of Gus Hamer, who I was amazed they managed to keep, and I still am based off his performances, not only as of late, but the whole season. No, they have got a very strong side, and they look as if they will be going to Wembley, and I'd probably back them out of all 4 to go up, because, you know, they were in the top 2. It was them and Leeds who were flirting with top of the league all season. Then out of nowhere, it just went wrong. Chris Wilder completely sort of imploded with his Sheffield United team, and they ended up falling short at the final hurdle going into automatic promotion. But I think, no, third place is probably fair based off when you look at the top 2 above them. But for me, if they don't go up, that would be disaster for me, because, you know, I thought that they would be competing for it all season.
Of course, Chris Wilder was going to turn up at Sheffield United and they were going to be, you know, amazing. Of course, that was going to happen. How did we not see that coming? What I called out was his terrible form at Middlesbrough and at Watford, and generally the fact that he took them down from the Premier League again with a really awful defence. Now, this season, they've probably got one of the best defences, because, of course, that makes sense too. I mean, for, you know, Cooper in goal, if it wasn't for Trafford, he'd probably be keeper of the season. Again, like you said, Harmer. You know, the strikers that they've actually got, if you think Campbell, Brewster, Cannon and Brereton Diaz, that's actually, for championship level, that's a decent number of forwards. And again, they probably should have gone up automatically, and I think it is disappointing that they did drop out, obviously to the joy of the other 2. As I said in my other chat about I can't remember which one it was, Sunderland or Coventry, please, Sheffield United, don't go up. The whole neutral football world, like, it's just a bit boring just to watch you ship like 100 goals. I know everyone says it about Norwich. It'd be really boring if Norwich goes up because we always lose every week. Would you not rather have like a Bristol City or a Coventry in the Premier League? Something a bit different, a little different spice, rather than seeing Anel Ahmedhodzic, concede 8 against Newcastle again. Do we all really want that again? I don't dislike Sheffield United as a football club. I think they probably will go. I think they probably will go on and win it, but it's just quite boring, isn't it?
Yeah, I echo Will's sentiment there. I really don't want Sheffield United going up. And I was listening to another great podcast, the Not Top 20 podcast, and they pointed out that Sheffield United have the worst form in playoffs known to man. They were even relegated in the playoffs in the 1980s. So, yeah, they've had, I think, 7 or 8 playoff campaigns and never got promoted. So hopefully they can stay that way. I made a bold prediction in my predictions video that it could go either way, and they could even potentially get back-to-back relegations. Of course, Sheffield United didn't, but Luton did. So maybe I should have backed a team for back-to-back relegations. But the reason why I had them finishing in the top 6 was because of their squad. I think on paper, they probably did have the best squad in the division. You always say about managers never go back, and it looked like Chris Wilder going back was a bit of a bad decision based on just how awful they were in the Premier League. But of course, Chris Wilder, Mr. Sheffield United, he's got them clicking in the Championship, and yeah, that they've been one of the best teams in the league, and for good reason as well.
I just think they've been efficient. Like, I watched them many times this season, and I haven't really been blown away by them. It just feels like to me they've just got some real good quality players. I think, as Freddie said earlier, Hamer is just fantastic for this level. And to be honest with you, he is often the match winner. Same with the goalkeeper Cooper as well. They've just got a few really good players in really important areas for the team, and that really gets you through, right? I think Chris Wilder's got a very decent defensive framework, and I think he's very, very adaptable. And I think his team have really, really flourished with that mentality as well. So, regretfully, fair play to them, but I just haven't been overly convinced by them. You look at the games against Burnley and Leeds when they played against sides who are pretty much in and around the level. They've been quite poor, really. They haven't got much results there either. So, if I'm Sheffield United, I'm very worried about what happens after next season if they do get promoted anyway. But yeah, I don't think they've been fantastic all season, but I just think they've been very, very effective.
No, they have been. And we go on to a team who was even more effective, especially defensively. Second place on what ended up being 100 points, and they missed out by goal difference. Burnley ended up in second. Henry and Will and Matthew spot on. So it's 3 out of 5 spot on. Me and Jack were agonisingly close. We had them just missing out in third. And I think fair enough for Burnley. It looked like they were going to finish third and they would just miss out. That is why I had them in third. I thought at the time that Luton, how funny is that I'm saying that? I thought Luton were better than someone. But no, I thought at the time that Luton and Leeds at the time that were better than them, and ultimately, Leeds were, Luton were way worse. But I thought based off those 3 at the top, for myself, I thought Burnley were just the weakest. I thought in terms of how many players they lost over the summer after Premier League relegation would hinder them. I thought the appointment of Scott Parker was a good one because he's more than proven at Championship level. You look at what he did with Fulham and Bournemouth. He had 2 promotions on his CV. So no, that was completely fair enough. I thought that was a really strong appointment and a really strong team. What I didn't expect was a record-breaking number of clean sheets. There were so many 0-0s in that, however, but defensively, so good. And ultimately, there's the saying of a good defense, a good attack can win your games, a good defense can win your titles. And, they may not have won the title, but they got 100 points and they were just phenomenal. I can't remember how many exactly it was they conceded, but no, they more than deserved to go up. You know, it's harsh the way in which they ended up losing the title, but no, I think, you know, everyone here predicted them either third or second. So no, and ultimately it's where they came. But would you have expected 100 points and I don't even think 20 goals conceded?
Would you have expected Josh Brownhill to get like 17 goals? No one would have predicted that. If you look at their average position over the whole season, yeah, it probably was like third. Again, Sheffield United's fall off was their opportunity. But again, their defence, is incredible. And James Trafford, who was really out of his depth in the Premier League last campaign, has just, developed into, someone who we're looking at and thinking, could you actually be England's number one in 1 to 2 seasons, if even that? In my prediction, I didn't really back Scott Parker. I kind of, you kind of looked at his performances in the Prem and kind of the fact that he'd gone to Bruges, I think, and had also done a pretty dire job in Belgium. It kind of felt like his magic had sort of faded, but obviously put him third. I did back the type of players that they had. Obviously, I completely agree with what you said, Freddie, in terms of the number of players that they shipped in the summer, and that could have been, a disaster. It felt like every day there was a player leaving Burnley for somewhere else. So it was a very chaotic dressing room to try and knit together. But yeah, as we saw again in our watch along at Turf Moor, that team looked like it kind of glued together, and some very good signings within that. Obviously Hannibal from Man United, Zion Fleming from Millwall, Sean as well, but that defence was what ultimately got them promoted, but no title.
I do think it's unprecedented for them to concede 16 goals in a 46-game season. That is outrageous to even comprehend that. And it's the best championship, the best defence the championship's ever seen, and the best defence the championship will ever see. I think it will take some beating to concede less than 16 goals. But look, Scott Parker, I agree with you, Freddie. I thought it was a really good appointment and someone to really steer the ship in the right direction. I did think going into the season that there'd be one team who was better than them, which we'll get to shortly. But no, I thought with the other team and with them that there were no real question marks around them, and that's why they had to make my top two. But also as well, this season is crucial for Burnley, just with how good they were defensively, because it is something that they can use as a springboard, both within their play style and physically in the Premier League as well next season. And if you said to me in a year's time, will Burnley have stayed up in the Premier League, it really wouldn't surprise me. It would surprise me if they do it with Scott Parker, but if they make a change, then it's a change for the better with the players they've got there, it really would not surprise me if they were able to really kick on from this and stay in the Premier League and become an established Premier League team again, like they have been over the last 6-7 years or so.
If you were a betting man from probably between August to December and you bet on Burnley to have under 2.5 goals versus a certain opponent, then you'd be a very, very rich man. But but in all seriousness, fair play to Burnley. They had a real big crisis, actually, I think, in terms of scoring goals, I think, during the winter time. And I think the big player for them that really helped them get them through that tough period was Marcus Edwards. I think he came in January and it was absolutely outstanding. I just think he just helped them ease a burden off the other attacking players a little bit, and I think that's allowed the likes of Fleming and also Anthony as well just to also score. some really important goals as well. So fair play to Parker there. He showcased his experience yet again about dealing with those issues which can occur during a promotion season. So fair play to Burnley. Very, very deserved winners to go obviously up into the top 2 places. And despite what other podcasts said about Burnley being the worst side to be promoted from the Championship after getting 100 points, which is a very interesting take. They did ever so well, so fair play to them.
Yeah, they did superbly, but they didn't win the title because they didn't score enough goals ultimately. And another team did under a manager who has now had 5 seasons in the Championship. He's won the league in 3 of them. It was, of course, Leeds United with Daniel Farke. Henry and Will had it spot on, and he and Jack were agonisingly close. Matthew, what on earth was he thinking? Leeds in 9th a year after losing the playoff final. Nuts, absolutely nuts. But for me, the only reason I didn't have Leeds top is because they're Leeds. They always find a way to cock it up at the end of the season. They always find a way, and they nearly did. They very, very nearly did. And they ended up winning the league with a last-minute winner from Manuel Solomon, who, what a signing, by the way. I believe now they are going to sign him permanently because they've been promoted. But no, a great team, quality in every single position, maybe apart from Melier in goal, but no, an unbelievable team with a manager who us 4 know already is a winner at this level. Daniel Farke is a man who knows this division inside out and plays great football. And when it works, you get a team like Leeds who score so many goals, albeit concede a fair few more than expected, but they're free-flowing and they win games in such a brilliant and entertaining manner. And that's what they did. They won the league, and it's ultimately deserved. I think, so many people, 2 of us here had them to win the league. The other 2 had them for automatic promotion. I think if Leeds hadn't got it this season, Daniel Farke wouldn't be there anymore. He would have failed, but he responded to a really tough end of last season where they missed out on I think it was with 2 games to go. They missed out on automatic promotion. Then they lost the playoff final. They did it the Leeds way, but no, they end up winning the league with 100 points. And I think it's fair enough. I think they were better than everyone throughout the course of the season. And it's a 3rd league title for Daniel Farke.
Yeah, I mean, I think Freddie, you and I both obviously thought Luton would be up the top. So obviously, if we push my prediction table up slightly, then I'd be bang on. Damn it, Luton. But yeah, exactly like you said, it's Daniel Farke in the Championship and with a much bigger club with much deeper pockets. I think they signed Tanaka in the summer, who was probably the best midfielder in the Championship. Obviously, Pirro and Dan James have gone on to have a brilliant season. And it is interesting to essentially watch what Daniel Farke can do, with a bit more investment, with a much more kind of established squad and not having to buy, players from Dresden or Augsburg or wherever he had to drag players out from. But like you said, Freddie, it wasn't a season that was absent from Leedsness. If Burnley got all the way up to promotion because of their defensive prowess, Leeds' defensive prowess, well, in terms of their goalkeeper individually, was quite a concern and quite sort of shaky. And the Leedsness has even continued after they've been promoted, with all of this malarkey as to whether Farke will stay or not. It's quite hilarious, but we managed to get 1 point off them, and then obviously a very comfortable win for them at Ellen Road, as Freddie watched with his own eye. Freddie, you've been through a lot this season. Are you okay?
No, I'm not whatsoever.
No. But yeah, they have been the best team in the division the whole season. It's not really a surprise. And can't wait for them to finish on 9 points next season.
Well, how do you follow that up? But yeah, I echo everything Jack and Freddie have said. In Daniel Farke, you've got a manager who's basically addicted to winning and winning league titles. I think his record speaks for himself. And I've been saying all season, I think he's got a genuine chance of keeping Leeds in the Premier League. Is he a bad Premier League manager? No. I think he was just in charge of a bad Premier League club when he was in charge of us, and a club that didn't back him and who said he had to take free hits, whereas that won't be accepted at Ellen Road. Leeds, both the Leeds board and the Leeds fans would not stand for that. So he'll get backing, and it'll be interesting to see what Farke can do in the Premier League for a big club like Leeds with backing. I think they'll be all right, but no, they've blown everyone away this season, which again is quite alarming, seeing that they've lost their two best players. They lost Somerville and they lost the other guy whose name escapes me, who went to Brighton. Ruter, that's the one. Two key players both departed, and yet they've still got one of the best teams in the Championship. You've got players like Manuel Solomon, you've got Dan James there, Tanaka, just to name a few. And they've all been brilliant, and they've blown everyone away. They are league champions, and rightly so. And they can really kick on now and look to hopefully stay up in the Premier League.
5 words. Daniel Farke is the GOAT. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you all very much if you sat here and watched all of it. By far the longest MFW podcast we've done, nearly 2.5 hours long. So no, what did you make of our predictions? Let us know some of your own ones. Did you think Luton were going to win the league? Did you think Sheffield United would finish mid-table? Let us know in the comments below. It's been a pleasure to bring the latest episode of the MFW podcast to you, either on YouTube or Spotify, however you choose to watch or listen to us for talk about pure nonsense for however long we do. But it's goodbye for now, and we'll see you for the next video of ours on the YouTube channel or the next podcast on Spotify.